And then we read verse 6 and 7. So as they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they celebrated, Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. So we see here that the women of Israel are quite fond of David. So they're singing and they're dancing, they're celebrating the victories of Israel. And that is rather unique. For much of the time period that the book of 1 Samuel covers, we see the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, constantly on defense. In recent chapters, we've seen the Philistines again and again coming in to the promised land. But even before that, in other chapters, we read about the Ammonites and other tribes, these warring factions coming in, crossing borders, and coming into their land. They're constantly on the defensive throughout this book. And finally, now it seems like they have the upper hand. Finally, this soldier, this leader, David, is leading the armies of King Saul, and they are pushing back the enemies. And it's not just barely scraping by, but they're winning by thousands or by tens of thousands. And so they have something to sing about. They're singing about the king, and they're singing about this rising star, or perhaps maybe his chief officer. They're just singing about it. And so we could just say the Israelite people loved David. And then maybe if I could just have a little pause here. The women of Israel, they're often seen singing songs of victory and praise with tambourines. For those of you that are doing our one-year Bible reading plan, you would have come across 1 Samuel 15 this week. Anyone? Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, in 1 Samuel 15, which is there, and you can read it whatever day you want. Anyway, so we read about the mighty victory, that God-given victory of the Red Sea parting, the people of Israel walking through, the Egyptian army chasing after them, and the walls just collapsing upon them, just implodes, and their oppressors are drowned in one decisive judgment and stroke from God. And then chapter 15, Moses is like, guys, let's sing. And then he sings the Song of Moses. And it's a wonderful song or a psalm of praise. And it's so good. And it's a great chapter. I recommend you read it. It's good. And did I say it? Did I? Okay. Who read Exodus 15 this week? Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you. Let me just take a sip of water and gather my thoughts here. Okay, so in Exodus 15, which is what I was talking about the whole time. So they come through the Red Sea, they have this victory, and then Moses is like, lads, let's sing. And then he leads them in this psalm of victory. And then he kind of runs out of breath, or, he's said all that he has to say. And then the song ends, It's like the final chord is strung. But then it says, Miriam, his sister, she gathers the women of Israel. And she grabs her tambourine. And she's like, but there's more to sing. There's more to praise God about. And so the women of Israel, they come out with their tambourines and they sing about what God has done to rescue them. And then also this takes place in the book of Judges 11 as well. And so I read that. And then I talked to the musicians and says, guys, can we rustle up a tambourine? We need a tambourine today, and we need a lady to play it. So thank you, Brogan, for doing that. Because you know what? When there's a victory, you do tend to sing joyfully. When a sports fan is singing, it means that their team won. And then on a more cosmic level, or more important level, when we see these people, these citizens of this oppressed nation, when they see that we are not at the mercy of the Egyptians any longer, or the Philistines, or the Ammonites, when they say, well, there's victory after victory coming. They want to sing and they want to celebrate. And believers, like, we're grafted in, we're brought into that tradition. And that's one of the reasons why Christians, we just gather together and we sing. Like, there is rarely a meeting that goes by that doesn't have times of celebration and singing. Because we rightly acknowledge that we were under oppression, that we were under slavery and death. But God has intervened in such a way to deliver us, and we just can't help but sing about it. Grab our tambourines and sing. Anyway,